What's up guys, how's it going, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. I'm glad you do all well. It's Kid Bombing here. I'll be doing another read aloud video. So I'd like to thank you for subscribing to my channel and leaving comments and giving likes to my videos. I'm so appreciate you guys, and I'll say you keep it rating. I was a bit overwhelmed, but I'll do my best if I can. Thank you for your patience. So I'll show you what I've got to read for you guys. It's something quite familiar. I have got the X-Files Whirlwind. Some of you might recognise the X-Files. It is a 20th Century Fox TV series. I like the X-Files. X-Files is my favourite science fiction show, which is featured two FBI agents were Dave Scully and Fox Mulder. So, show it to you guys, and it takes I think it is based on the TV series by Chris Carter. Yep, I guess you're all familiar with that. Shall I begin reading to you guys? So, we'll start on chapter 1. The sun was white and hot, and the wind blew ceaselessly. Annie Hatch stood alone on her ranch house porch, one hand absently rubbing her stomach as she tried to decide what to do. The late morning sun made her squint. The temperature already riding near 90, but the wind that coasted across the high desert made her wish, for the first time in a long time, that she were back in California. It hissed softly through the bush and whispered softly in her ear. Of course, she thought, you could also just be doddering old fool. A quick smile and a quicker and she inhaled. Slowly, deeply, taking the heat and the pungent, and so faintly she might have been, imagine it, a sweet touch of juniper, wind or not, voices or not, this was, all in all, far better than Hollywood. That was where she had made their money. So many years ago, it might have been a dream. Here was there had finally made their lives no dream at all. A breath of melancholy fluttered her eyelids, closed for the moment. It wasn't easy being a window, even after 15 years. There were still too many times when she thought she heard him clumping back for the stable behind the house, or whistling as fitted with a generator, or blowing gently on the back of her neck. The wind did that to her too. Enough, she muttered, and she strode impatiently to the end of the porch, leaned over the wrist-high rail, and looked down the side of a dope house to the stable. She whistled twice, high, sharp, and loud, giggled silently when she heard Nando curse, and very subtly letting her know he hadn't finished saddling Diamond yet. Was she trying to get him trampled? A second later, he appeared in the open doorway, hands on the right hips glaring at her from under his time-beaten Stetson. She waved gaily. He gestured sharply in disgust and vanished again. "That's cruel," a soft voice added behind her. She laughed as she turned. "He loves it, Shell, and you know it." Silver Quindorto looked at her skeptically for as long as she could. Then she grinned broadly, shaking her head as if at her child to Angelique to be punished. She was a round woman, face and figure, with a straight black hair forever caught in a single braid that hung down her back. Her skin was almost copper, her large eyes the colour of a starlight night. Today, as always, she wore a loose, plain white dress that reached to mid-skin and rigid skin boots. "You are staring," she scoffed lightly. Annie blinked. "I am? I'm sorry. My mom was wondering." She stared at her weathered floorboards. "I guess I'm just feeling my age today, dear." Silver rolled her eyes. "Oh, please, not again," and returned inside to prepare an early lunch. Annie thanked her silently for not feeding a self-pity. In truth, she knew she wasn't so bad for an old lady of 61. Her face was narrow, exaggerating green eyes and dark, not quite thick lips. The lines were more than from a son than her age. Her hair was white, but softly so, cropped short and brushed back, straight back over her ears, practical but still lovely. And her slender figure was such that, even after all these years, she was still able to turn more than a few heads whenever she drove into the city or up to Santa Fe. It was good for her ego. "Oh, brother," she thought. It was as I thought. What it was? Was it one of those days that crept up on her now and then, when she missed but so much it burned? There was nothing, any particular reason for it, no specific thing that jogged her memory. It just happened, like today. And her only cure was to take Diamond and a canteen and wade into the desert. Maybe, if she were brave enough, all the way to Mesa. Sure, she thought. Tomorrow, I'll wake up and find Bert beside me in bed. A snort behind her made her jump. She wailed just as Diamond thrust his head over the rail, his nose catching her stomach and shoving her back a step. "Hey," she said, with a scolding laugh. "Knock it off, you jerk." He was already in bridle and saddle, a short black horse with a rough diamond blaze between his eyes. Nando stood beside him, grinning, one hand on the animal's rump, his stained brown hat pushed back on his head. Says you serves you right, he told her smugly. He could have been Silver's twin, not her husband, save for a ragged streaks of grey hair, and the fact that his broad, blunt nose had been broken too many times for him to be rightly called him handsome. Those who didn't know him figured him for an ex-boxer or ex-marine, not a foreman of a range. That wasn't much of a range anymore, and he made a show of ignoring him and his rebuke. She adjusted her straw resting hat, fixed a strap under her chin, and swung her legs easily over the rail without the pause or hesitation. She grabbed a horn and swung lightly into the saddle. Only then did she look down at him. Not bad for an old lady, huh? The day you get old. Scenario. He answered solemnly, is the day I stopped shoveling horse for a living and start selling a bad tortoise to the tourists up Santa Fe. Diamond shook his mane impatiently. A warm gut made them turn their heads, but not before show an expression on his face. When he looked back, he was somber. It talks. I wouldn't know. He shook his head slowly, not quite sadly. You know, you always knew. No. She grabbed a reins angrily. I know nothing of the sort, Nando. She was prepared to cut Diamond away when Nando tapped her leg. Now that! Now what? He reached behind him and pulled out a canteen, grinning again. No rain, no water. He tucked it into the silver-stud saddlebag. She thanked him with a brisk nod and guided Diamond across the side lawn to the break in of the double split rail fence she had painted white a year before. Once through, she followed it around to the front, checking the grass inside to see where it was dying. Everywhere, she realized, everywhere. Despite the extraordinarily expensive, undoubtedly graceful below-ground system her late husband had installed himself and had to connect it to one of a score of deep wells on the ranch. The grass Sodom survived intact all the way through the summer. Still, she thought, as the ranch drifted away behind her, wasteful or not, it was better than nothing. At least it had colour. At least it had life. All right. She snapped to the shadow that rode behind her. All right, that's enough, Annie. That's enough. Her right hand held the reins lightly. Her left hand rested on the thigh, and it trembled. She ignored it, concentrating instead on a rolling land ahead, automatically checking for wind or flash flood damage to the narrow wood bridges. But Bert and Nando had built across the several areas, meandering across the 4,000 acres grazing to her right. Every so often, at the high heat brown hill that blocked the sun each morning, like an exposed knobby root of an ancient, distant tree. It flunked the recently paved road that led easterly into Stat and west to the mesa to the reservation. She couldn't see it from here. The hill crossed the road a half-mile ahead, still high, still marked with a thorned shrubs and tufts of grass sharp enough to slice through the palm. Still studded with large brown rocks and partially buried boulders, like the wall to keep the rest of the world out, or to keep the colour chain in. For some, however, it wasn't high enough or strong enough. They left to see what the world outside looked like, to discover what the whole world had to offer besides life on a reservation. For her, it was Bert, a brave but lucrative career in Hollywood. For others, unfortunately, it was produced and pain, and ultimately a grave too far from home. Diamond shied suddenly, forcing her to pay attention, to glance quickly at the ground for signs of rattlesnakes. They had be out now. The sun was high and warm enough. Cold, deceptively still, on whatever rocks they could found. She saw none and frowned her puzzlement when the horse began to prance, telling her he wasn't thrilled about approaching the range side of a hill. Thus, when she saw a buzzards, 5 of them circled low near the 2-lane road, and she mouthed a sharp curse as she nudged the horse in that direction. There weren't many cattle left. She had sold most of them off not long after Bud had died, and seldom replaced the ones she lost. Every so often, though, one of those remaining found a way through the barbed wire that marked their pastures. Sometimes they tumbled into the Oreo. Sometimes a rattler got them. Sometimes they just couldn't find a water or the food, and simply gave up, laid down and died. Closer, and she saw a fan packed on a sandy shoulder on the far end of a fence that ran along the black top. Fudge waves of a ghostly heat shimmered up from the road, blurring the vehicle's outline. "What do you think?" she asked Diamond. "Tourists?" The desert beyond a sandy mountains was beautiful in a stark and desolate way, with flashes of colour, all of them beautiful because they were so rare. It was also a trap. It wasn't unusual for the unthinking tourist to pull out because they wanted to walk a little, stretch his legs. Check these out. It also wasn't unusual for the heat and deceptive distance to combine to lose him. One minute you could see everything, the next you were alone. Sometimes he didn't make it back. Another 20 yards, a Diamond pulled up short. "Hey," she said, "come on, don't be stupid." He shook his head finally. reaching around to nip at her boot. A sign wasn't moving another inch. She glared helplessly at the top of his head, watching his ears twitch. Agitation forcing him would serve no purpose. He was as stubborn as she, and most definitely stronger. Can you say Chloe? She muttered sourly as she swung out of her saddle and ordered him to stay put. Idiot. Dusting her hands on her jeans, she trudged toward the van, scanning the area for whoever it was who had been stupid enough to leave it. She had gone a dozen yards when she heard a flies. Her stomach tightened in anticipation, but she didn't stop. A check of the fence revealed no breaks in the wire, no toppled posts. The van itself was a dusty dark green, streaked with long dried mud. Hello, she called, just in case. The flies sounded like bees. The wind looked her from behind. She stepped around a sprawling juniper, and her left hand suddenly clamped tightly to her stomach. Oh God, she whispered. Dear Jesus. It wasn't a lost cow. There were two of them, and they lay face down, arms, legs spread, unnaturally twisted. Flies crawled in undulating waves over them, thick and black, drifting into the air and drifting down again. Not 5 feet anyway. Away. A buzzard watched its wings flexing slowly. It snapped its beak once, and he spun away and bent over on her knees and shut her eyes shut and stomach lurching, her throat working hard to keep the bile from rising. She knew the bodies were humans, but only by their shape. Even with the flies, even with the sun, it was clear they had been skinned. Okay, so we'll stop on page 11, chapter 2 of the X-Files Whirlwind. So, okay, I hope you stay tuned where we continue reading X-Files Whirlwind. And if you are happy, give a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. And leave a comment down below. And I'll see you a bit. Please stay tuned for continuing X-Files Whirlwind. And see you a bit.